And you just got to get on with people. There's nowhere else to go. So the first famous person I met was Princess Diana. And I found it really difficult to maintain eye contact. I was very nervous, yeah.
Do you think this is really something that people really are aware that the council even does?
I eyeballed every single one of those students after every lesson, no matter whether they'd achieved something incredible or that just to say, today you've achieved something.
Can you tell us a bit about those medals and whether that recognition is something that's important to you?
The medals last a lifetime, and that's why they're so important to me. Don't compare yourself to others, just compare yourself to what you have the ability to achieve.
Interesting.
Have you ever thought about doing motivational speeches? I'm Sam.
And I'm Erin.
And this is Dorset Council's podcast, Invisible Impact.
Because the work we do may not always be visible, but the impact is anything but.
So, Nick, can you please tell us a bit about what your Dorset Council's Armed Forces Coordinator, is that right? Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about what you do, really?
Okay, so my job is to deliver the Armed Forces Covenant strategic plan. And it's a plan that incorporates a number of objectives that tie in with local authority deliverables, such as housing, education, and a number of other key sectors within the public service and the public sector for the Armed Forces community in Dorset. And the Armed Forces community includes veterans, serving members of the Armed Forces. We've got some large garrisons in Dorset. We also have a lot of nice locations where veterans settle, but it also includes dependents, wives, husbands of serving members of the Armed Forces, and children. So it's really to ensure that those that come to live and work in Dorset, whether they are here to work on a permanent basis or when they retire and they want to settle in Dorset, are not disadvantaged in any way based upon some of the expectations and challenges that the Armed Forces provides or creates on a basis of the way the Armed Forces works. Is very transient in its nature.
And can you mentioned sort of those challenges. What are the challenges that are facing there?
Yeah, so interesting. A lot about the Armed Forces, and I served in the Armed Forces for 27 years, is that there is a lot of movement. The expectation, in order to be promoted, in order to have a long career, particularly the career that I experienced, in order to get promotion, you've got to move from job to job. And because the jobs aren't fixed, there are different locations where the Armed Forces delivers different capability, or there are different helicopter squadrons, for example. Yeovil in particular, Yeovilton Air Base or Naval Air Station has helicopters, but helicopters aren't in every county. But there are other things we have to deliver, such as sort of kit and equipment. We have to do a lot of administrative jobs as well as being able to deploy all around the world, whether that's by ship or by helicopter or by aircraft. And those airfields aren't in every county. So in order to do that and have that versatility and be able to show your ability to be able to work across the Armed Forces, you have to move around. And that includes bringing your family in and out of Dorset. So that could be kids starting school halfway through the academic year. It could be locating to an area that is not necessarily have housing that is close to any of those military establishments. So a number of challenges, not only moving individuals, but also moving families, relocating and making new friends.
What about those that have maybe left the Armed Forces as well? Is that an area that you support?
That's definitely an area that we support. So the transition from military life, from a military career into, and I'll use the term, a civilian role, and that's something that we use. We differentiate between the military as an armed forces organisation and a civilian organisation. But those civilian organisations also work to support the armed forces. So there are a number of jobs where you can go from a military setting into a military setting, but you change from military uniform into civilian uniform. So yeah, lots of the veterans that settle in Dorset in particular, because it's such a lovely area to settle, and we've got a large naval population, so families settle and live and work in Dorset. So yeah, we do look at veterans and people who leave in the armed forces, how we can help them gain meaningful employment, as well as support them with educational qualifications to get them to interview, get them through the interview. And the Armed Forces Covenant in its own right, as a sort of I say legislation in some respects, a regulation in that it offers that opportunity for those who don't necessarily live and work in Dorset can still have the opportunity to apply for those jobs in a fair and sort of cut out any disadvantage that may exist, because they're coming back to live in Dorset. Maybe they have family ties or family links. Yeah.
Do you think this is really something that people really are aware that the council even does?
I think it's slowly becoming clear what the council does, because we're quite unique in that the role that I have has been embedded into Dorset Council. So we cover Pan Dorset in this particular role. We have our Armed Forces champions. Armed Forces champion Mike Baker is working across Dorset as well. So there is a kind of two streams coming into Dorset Council, but particularly my job is unique, as other counties don't have a role that's similar to mine. Although there is an indication from the Veterans Minister, Al Khan's, that they would like to have sort of a field officer embedded within the local authorities as a sort of, or to cover certain areas of the UK to ensure that the Armed Forces Covenant is joined up.
Yeah, working closer together.
Working closer together, yeah.
You've mentioned as well, you've met quite a few famous people. Kind of how did some of those moments come about, and what were some things that stood out for you as part of those?
So
who did you meet?
So the first famous person I met was Princess Diana. And I was a 17-year-old sailor, and I just joined my first ship. And because she was the Duchy of Cornwall, the ship that HMS Cornwall was my first ship, having completed my training. And she joined the ship as we were about to deploy out to America to come and visit us all and sort of wave us off. And because I was the youngest member of the department, of course,
stitched up.
They wanted me to be there, and I do remember that moment. I was incredibly shy, and I was explaining to her how a teleprinter and a signals broadcast works, but I ended up just talking to the keyboard, because she had this way of sort of her gaze was. So I was quite tall. I was a tall 17-year-old, so gazing up, and I found it really difficult to maintain eye contact. I was very nervous, yeah.
And is there anyone that's kind of affected the way you've done your career, or any advice or anything that anyone's given you? Or
one of the people that really influenced me, the current Veterans Minister, Al Khan's, was my boss, and we served together in Afghanistan. And I served with Al for a 6-month tour. And there in 2006, and then a few years later, we met up again in Afghanistan, working in another organisation. But yeah, he's been really influential. He's a lot younger than I was, so as his sort of second in command, or his 2IC of our sort of 6-man team, he was 26 then, and already you could see that there was so much energy, and I know that it's an incredibly tough job working in government, and I totally appreciate that. And it always sort of, I'm always inquisitive about what inspires people to sort of go down that pathway. And
at that age as well.
At that age, but he's now we're a bit older now.
Yeah.
We're talking 2000, but at that age, yeah, certainly. I mean, he was a colonel in the Royal Marines, and he gave a week's notice to sort of run for government and as an MP. And we were getting a lot of messages on social, on our sort of WhatsApp messages. Have you seen what Al's doing? And we thought it was I've initially had to reread it, but then I kind of thought about it. I thought it doesn't surprise me, because somebody who is so inspired by by improvement. He was always trying to do better and better. He was very competitive, and I remember going on sort of training exercises with him, and just knowing that you had a really great leader, somebody who was really going to push you. So we're not going to take it easy on this, because we need to know what tough feels like. We need to know the worst case scenario, so that when we're faced with a situation, we at least have the ability and the experience and the knowledge and the training to be able to deal with it. And we were involved with some very tricky and scary situations in our 6-month tour in 2006, and unfortunately we did lose a number of good friends. Yeah, he's been very influential, I have to be honest.
Ambitious is kind of what I'm getting.
Very ambitious, yeah, very ambitious, and I do listen a lot to what how he discusses, and I still see him on the TV, and I just wonder how he manages to be able to answer some of those really challenging questions that he gets asked in front of the camera, which is something that we're doing right now. But it's and I can see how difficult it is to kind of.
Hopefully these aren't too
responses. No, they're okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe as we get further down.
So we asked you about some sort of objects that are important to you, and you talked about your medals. Can you tell us a bit about those medals, and whether that recognition is something that's important to you? Yeah,
it certainly is. Medals for me, and I've had the question that I was asked a number of times, and it's the sort of thing that I bring up with. I worked as a further education lecturer for about 7 years at Weymouth College when I retired from the Navy, and there are always those questions that students are really keen to know the answers to, and the medals was always something that I could introduce in as much as going to work and having a meaningful career and having getting a wage. Money is we need it to live. We need to buy food. We need all the basic human needs. The medals are really important to me. I can kind of cherish those because they are a sort of a symbol of achievement, of also a sense of being able to reflect on memories, and you look at your medals. Mine really only make an appearance once a year, when around sort of November the 11th and Remembrance, and it's only then when you kind of look at the medals and you look at everybody else's and you compare, what medals have I got and what medals have you got. But I'd also see some medals that people have that I have no idea what they are. So it's useful because it almost generates a little bit of conversation. Certainly does with the local community, particularly those that when we go for a little bit of a social afterwards, perhaps that's all part and parcel of being in this celebration is a key to, and it's a way of being able to kind of socialise and that community spirit. And really, we don't go necessarily to Remembrance Day and then just go home. A lot of this kind of, we have friends we haven't seen for a long time, so we sort of meet up and chat. But medals are the way I kind of define it, and I used to define it this way to my students, is that every time I get paid something and I buy something like that car will last for a few years, as long as I service it regularly and it's MOT'd and I don't sort of drive it too erratically. But my medals are always there. They last a lifetime, and they mean more to me. If somebody was to say to me, you're going to go on an operational tour somewhere around the world, would you prefer to have a large pay packet, or would you prefer to have a medal? I personally, and this may not be the view of others, I'd prefer to have a medal, because I know that whatever I spend that money on, it may not last as long as the medal. The medals last a lifetime, and that's why they're so important to me.
It sounds a bit like kind of there's a bit like Pokemon-esque, where people comparing, oh, you've got that one, or where'd you find that one, and things like that.
Yeah, anybody who's in the armed forces, or anybody from the armed forces community who's listening to this will be thinking, yeah, we do medal check. Of course we do.
I will put a picture up of yours as well, so we can see which ones you've got.
Yeah. I mean, is that sense of community, is that something that's important to you?
Very much so. The difference, and again, these are really great opportunities, particularly working in the education sector, because when I left and I did my degree as a 50-year-old, so I didn't have a degree when I left the military. I was fortunate enough that I had enough qualifications to commission as an officer late on in my career, and teaching and asking students to research would always give me a bit of opportunity to reflect myself and say, how would I answer and respond to that? And yeah, certainly it's something that I feel is the community. If I was to compare the public services, which is one of the subjects that I taught, I said I would look at the health service, the police, the fire service, and all the public services, and I'd say to them, this is where you kind of visualize it, is that when there's a fire and everybody else is running in the opposite direction, the fire service are running into the fire. So that's what sets you apart first and foremost, is that you're putting your life at risk to the sake of others. But I also noted the difference between the armed forces and the emergency services is that when we left the battlefield, for want of a better word, we didn't go straight home, sit down and get back to normal life. What we did was we left and we went back to a tent, and the people that we sat down and we chatted with and we discussed were all the people that we'd worked with. On a ship, for example, in the middle of the Atlantic, when you finish work in the office, you go back to your living quarters with the people you've just worked with. So you live together 24/7. And that is a sense of community that a lot of veterans long for when they leave, and they don't realize it straight away. They realize it when we have these social gatherings and they say, I've missed that. That's what I've needed. And it's useful to know that if that's indeed the case, then a lot of these breakfast clubs and drop-in centres are there to provide that as a means of, you're not going to take it away from you. If that's the sort of thing you enjoy and that's what you want, then we can create an atmosphere like that for you.
It's a bit like school. I feel like you don't realize till you're a little bit older. Once you've come out of school, you actually quite like the routine.
Yeah.
Having all your friends and stuff just all around you, all like in your classes and everything. And then as soon as you kind of come out of school and get into the work environment, you're a little bit more like on your own, or having a completely new set of people. People would say like it's like you're a character on a new TV show and things like that, or a new season of a TV show when you have the whole new group of people.
That's pretty. It's fair to say, because dare I say it, it's same as being at school, is you're forced to work together.
Yeah.
You have to get on, and I think that's a really great way. And I really like to encourage my students to find ways to get on with people. Everybody's different. Everybody has, hidden agendas or different challenges. Equally, it's the same in the armed forces. You have to live together. A couple of people I know, former Royal Marines, did last year and this year, are rowing the Atlantic. It seems to be something that Royal Marines like to do. They row the Atlantic and sitting in a boat with another person, the same person, for 6 to 8 weeks, rowing from, I believe they row from the Seychelles to an island in the Bahamas or an island in the Caribbean.
But sounds nicer than when I thought you said when you said the Atlantic, I was expecting like.
So the start and finish point look really lovely, but it's the bit in the middle that's probably not. So equally there are those challenges, and you just got to get on with people. There's nowhere else to go. You've got to get on. You've got to find ways of managing and accepting differences, I think, and that's what the military creates. And I like to try and embed that in my teaching as well.
Do you think there's a gap in kind of public sector work, like whether there isn't that sense of community, and how we can bring that into people at work?
I think there's always gaps, and there are always the sort of those opportunities, breakout areas and cafes and restaurants and areas where people should have that opportunity to be able to sort of socialize. Although we do offer choice, so that people just want to finish work and go home and decompress. Yeah. There was an interesting lecture that I sat, and I kind of use this as an example, is that years and years ago, when the dockyards used to sort of have, you had hundreds and thousands of workers. That was the local source of income. Everybody that lived in those areas. But I talked about Plymouth and Portsmouth dockyards, the military dockyards, and that was the source of everybody's income. Everybody worked in the dockyard, and when they finished in the dockyard, they went to the pub and they had a drink and a couple of pints and they decompressed, and that's where they left their problems. And they went home and they had tea and they settled down. And somebody sort of highlighted to me that a lot of that has changed because of, obviously health risk, but also the fact that a lot of sort of these pubs are now sort of places where you sit and dine, and people generally don't tend to go to pubs. If that's maybe that's a trend, maybe that's something that's fair to say. So actually, I do believe that social interaction and offer it as an option is there, and it certainly does give you that opportunity just to leave your problems behind, pick them up when you go back to work. If that opportunity exists, then it does certainly have a place. Yeah.
I would say the most social interaction I had from my job and from my work was during like COVID and lockdown, because I think people were making such a conscious effort to let's all have a team meeting, let's play a game, let's do a quiz, it's all that sort of stuff, like to make sure everyone's got a sense of community there. But I feel like ever since that's kind of phased out, it's gone back to how it was before, where people maybe like you were saying, where it's like, I've done my job, I'm going to go do what I want when I finish work, I'm not going to talk to you guys anymore, stuff like that, which is fine. I do that as well. But
yeah, I'm fortunate that outside work, I run fitness classes for veterans, armed forces, and we included the health service within that because of because of COVID and the effect that COVID and the workload that it imposed on the National Health Service, and generally because it hasn't entirely gone away, because the backlog of patients and the targets that are set in order to sort of get back to to perhaps the waiting lists that we've experienced in the past. So there's a huge amount and significant amount of pressure on them. So it's important, and we feel it was important to include them within our community, and we really like the fact and the way that everybody is integrated so well, and they rely upon it. So our classes just increase throughout the week. So I think the only day we don't run anything is on a Friday or a Sunday. But we think that social interaction, and as you pointed out there, is if there's an activity that they can do, then we try to hit the key times are there about 6 o'clock, 6:30 when they finish a shift. They can come and get some exercise, they can decompress, and they can still go home, and they've still got enough time to do all the other chores and the other
and the decompress
duties.
I think is the main thing, because like it's all that mindfulness, like to make it, especially with like shift work, or even like people that work from home, it's like how you have that disconnect, so you don't bring the work home, and that can be hard if you're working at home as well.
True.
But like I say, you think you've done a very long shift as well, then it's still going to be on your mind for a while, unless you find some way to process it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've talked kind of broadly about all the different things you've been doing in your career, and there's lots of different things, lots of different areas, like we were talking about, kind of sidestepping and bouncing around different things. Is there anything that you think kind of has led you to where you are now, in particular, like a person, an event, or is it just something that's naturally?
So this is interesting, and when I left Weymouth College, having taught, say, for about 7 years, one of the hardest things was to explain to my tutor group that I was leaving to pursue another career, and I think the way I put it into context and a way that I felt that I could describe it to them so that it would be palatable and easy for young people to understand. People, again, as you kind of highlighted there, is those young people, I guess, saw me as a mentor. I mean, that was my role as a lecturer. But I understood that right from the day I started my teaching training, is that whether you like it or not, you are a coach, a mentor, and a role model. So you have to be really cautious and conscious of that throughout the lesson, throughout the week, throughout the academic year. And I said to the group, I said, this is how I'm going to put it into context. For them, I said, I've taught you, and I've taught this subject in the public services and sport for 7 years. I said, I've looked at everything I've taught you, and I know what you're about to embark on. I said, and I'm extremely jealous. I said, because I had a fantastic career. I've got so many stories that sometimes I talk to people, and I think I don't even believe myself that some of the experiences and some of the events that I was part of actually occurred. But I suppose that's part of what the job job in the armed forces brings. And I said to them, so they said to make it understandable for you, I said, I've looked at everything you've done. I said, and I think I still want to do that job. I still want to be out there. I still want to be in the armed forces community. I still want to help people. You know, I'm helping young people teaching, but I want to go out there and make a difference. And when somebody spotted the job and said, Nick, I think this is going to really, you're going to enjoy this. Said, there's a great job that's just appeared on the Dorset Council jobs website. Go and have a look at it. And as soon as I saw it and read it, you know, it's one of the, you get that feeling, you know, in some jobs when I left the military, I looked and thought, is that me? Can I do that? Can I do that? I looked at it and said, I can do all of that. And I really want, I want the job. And I was really, really excited. I do think you've got to keep your eyes and ears open for those opportunities when they arise, and be courageous enough to give it a go. You've got to take that leap. It's easy to stay in one area because you're comfortable, but if you want to do more and you want to find out more about what you're capable of, then I think you should take those opportunities when they appear and when they occur. Yeah,
I think that's a great lesson.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Of progression in general, or I think you're right as well. Some people, they can get too comfortable sometimes, and we're all guilty of staying something because it's comfortable, but it's looking for those opportunities or admitting when those opportunities appear when it comes to jobs, or even taking on a new skill, doing an apprenticeship, doing a course online, all those sort of things, kind of steps and
a bit of challenge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But genuinely speaking, I think that kind of nature of sort of supporting communities has come from the armed forces, because I grew up in an armed forces family, so I don't know anything else, if that's fair to say. But although I've had that opportunity as well to sort of see other groups and organisations, but I'm fortunate that my wife's in the health service, and she's been in the health service for over 28 years. And she cares.
Yes.
She definitely cares. And she certainly loves the job, and it is stressful. It is incredibly stressful. And I think that a lot of that has influenced me as well. I think that because my wife works in a caring organisation, and I've been introduced to a lot of people that she works with as well, can certainly see where it's tough, but they do it for a reason, and I think that reason is they genuinely care.
Yeah, about making a difference. It's and that's what attracted you to this role in the first place.
Yeah, really, it is empowerment, but in the nicest possible way. Achievement, it can come from watching somebody do something that you can't. So if I kind of show somebody as a fitness instructor and say, I can't do that, but you can, I can show you how to do it, and they say, I can't demonstrate it, but you might need somebody else to kind of take you that next stage further. But there's always creating a baseline for somebody just to start, and that could be just give it a go. That's my job done. I've just encouraged you because that's all I can do, and then the experts can come in and do all the rest. But I really do enjoy it. Yeah.
There's kind of leadership angle in that as well. It's like a good leader would not necessarily want to do everything themselves, but recognize the potential in other people and push them.
Oh, that's absolutely. I mean, that soft skill in itself is having the courage to say to somebody, I definitely think this is for you, and knowing that they might come back to you later on and say that was the worst experience of my life. Why did you ever? But I think you have to have the courage to be able to do it. To say to people, I do think you should give it a go. But I think absolutely, leadership has the responsibility to be able to develop others, because as I've always said it, we're not going to be around forever. Okay, and I also say to people, they say, what's one of the reasons why you go out? Why do you run these exercises? How you and your wife, are you doing it, getting time together? I said, this is all our time together. We're running fitness classes together. It's our hobby. If we didn't run them, we'd be in the gym, and you'd probably come along anyway. So that's how it works. It's just creating a setting that is in an environment where we're able to kind of share our own experiences. I really enjoy the volunteering. I really do, and the biggest thing about the volunteering is at the end is the big thank you that you get. It's just nice to go away and say, do you know, I've made a difference today. I haven't taken anything other than the the gratitude of that people have supported somebody to create an event. We marshal it, the sort of some of the triathlons locally. Yeah.
So you do a lot of stuff. I'm just struggling to think about how the logistics of getting it all booked in and the time wise of doing all the different like volunteering and your job and weightlifting and everything. But through your career and what you're doing and kind of working on now, is there any lessons or anything that you think is a kind of a big takeaway that anyone listening, like, that you would like to kind of pass on?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons is to recognize your potential. I think dipping your toe in the water and going and seeing, if there's something you've always wanted to do, give it a go. I have a little bit of a criticism of a phrase that I say: if you put your mind to it, you can achieve anything. And I do say to people, that's not necessarily the case. There are always things that are going to get in the way, and a lot of the time, there's a lot of luck. But in terms of if you put your mind to it, you can achieve something. You can achieve what is achievable. I'm never going to fly to the moon because I'll never be medically fit enough. As much as I put my mind to it, I will never be an astronaut.
Or rich enough
To go to the moon. But there are lots of other opportunities that I can be involved with, or I can get involved with, that will give me the same sense of achievement. And what I achieve and what others achieve, I always say, and I say it to my students a lot, is don't compare yourself to others. Just compare yourself to what you have the ability to achieve. And just because somebody else has managed it doesn't mean that you can, because there are all sorts of different physical abilities that we have or we don't have. But whatever gives you a real sense of achievement, and also, thank people regularly for hard work. Hard work doesn't cost a lot, but people need to be recognised for what they're doing. What is that? I did it in the class. I'd have to make sure that I eyeballed every single one of those students after every lesson, no matter whether they'd achieved something incredible or that just to say, today you've achieved something, and that's just enough. Because if you don't, there's the risk that they'll stop doing it.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Have you ever thought about doing motivational speeches?
Well, I'm fortunate enough that I've listened to enough of them. That they are really influential. They have helped me to really sort of recognise that my pathway. I have made mistakes, and fortunately, I have also known people who have made mistakes, and unfortunately, they've ended up on the wrong side of the law. However, and I kind of go back to some of the visits that we used to do for our students, take our students into Portland Prison, and I used to look at how the prison officers, how they communicated, the way they created an environment that that sort of changed people, and through physical exercise was one in particular. And I would say to my students, there's an opportunity here for you to be a physical education officer and help with rehabilitation of offenders, and through physical exercise and achievement. I said that's just 1 hour a day, but it's so important. It was probably the most important building on that site inside that prison, was how important that the gym was to some people. And I say the sports students, you can make a huge difference. You can develop into one of the greatest fitness instructors, because you are going to be challenged with all the challenges that you probably wouldn't necessarily meet in a sort of a local gym. I said, but you'll get a lot there if you've got the courage to go in there and really give it a go. And I've met some really great people who have either still in the prison service, who have left and are doing great things from their experience. Yeah.
Thanks for coming in and taking part. We talked through a lot of different things, a lot of different subjects.
I'm really grateful for the opportunity just to share a bit of the experiences that I've had, and I've never, this is my first podcast, so there's another one that I can go and another question for somebody else. I did my first podcast. What did that feel like? It's quite nerve-wracking, but it's nice. It's a nice setting. Thank you very much.
Okay, and thanks for listening as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. That was amazing.